Welcome back to G&T. Every week on the programme, we talk to a new MP who was elected for the first time at the general election last December. It was a huge new intake, 140 new MPs in total. So, who are they all? This week is the Conservative MP for Ashfield, Lee Anderson. Good morning, Mr Anderson. Mr Anderson, good morning. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you perfectly.
Hi, Lee.
Hi, Gloria. You all right?
Yes, Tar.
Good.
Thank you for joining us, Mr Anderson. Before we start, let me just ask you, you're suffering from coronavirus now, and of course isolating along with the Prime Minister and 6 other MPs after meeting him in number 10 or so days ago. How are you doing? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm feeling fine. I think my wife suffered a little bit more than me. This is actually, I was called about an hour ago by the track and trace department at the NHS. And they thankfully tell me this is my last day of isolation, so I can crack on and get back to work tomorrow.
And how is your wife? Is she on the repair as well?
Yeah, she's on the repair. She's suffered quite a few headaches this week because she's got other health conditions as well. So it's been a bit tougher for her. But I think the toughest part is the isolation bit, having to stop in, not going out the door. That's probably the hardest part.
Yeah, difficult. Well, look, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. Let's talk about your path to becoming a Conservative MP 11 months ago, because it's not a usual one for Tory MPs, not least because you spent almost all your political life as an active member of the Labour Party.
Yeah, I mean, first joined the Labour Party back in the 80s in the days of Michael Foot, and I was brought up on a strict diet of Skinner, Scargill, and Tony Benn back in the 70s and 80s. So I was the son of a miner who became a striking miner. I followed my dad into the pits. So the only way I was ever going to vote really was for the Labour Party. In a heavily unionised industry, everybody voted Labour. All the men in my family worked at the pit. I worked at the pit, so it was a given. It's something you just did, but things change. I really got involved in the Labour Party. Probably I rejoined the Labour Party, I think, in about 2010, 2009, something like that. And then I was fortunate enough to go and work for the local Labour MP at the time in Ashfield, who I think sat with you.
That'll be Gloria.
Morning, Gloria.
Morning.
And I'm going to be brutally honest. The 5 years I spent working for Gloria and being involved with the local Labour Party in Ashfield, it actually woke me up a little bit. And I thought, this is not the Labour Party or the working class movement I want to be involved with. You look at the conference, and they were more interested in waving the Palestinian flags than they were waving the Union Jack. And actually, working class people on a whole are hardworking. They want their kids to go to a good school. They want their kids to do well. They want to get promoted. They want to be aspirational. They want to have a nice house, a nice car. These are all really working class values, but they're conservative values with a small c. So, in the end, it wasn't that difficult. The decision was easy for me to move over to the Conservative Party. The actual action of doing it, obviously, was a lot more difficult because my roots, my family, my friends, and everybody who knew me were probably they were Labour supporters. I got many family members who were actually Labour Party members as well. So that was a difficult part. And of course, speaking to my previous boss, that was a difficult part. But, things happen for a reason sometimes, and it's probably the best move I ever made. And I'm very, very happy.
You were a miner, you just said. Your dad was a miner before you. I think you striked in the 1980s during the miners' strike. Would you have joined the Tory Party?
I started the pits just after the strike. So I went through that bit, watching my dad and my uncles and all my male members going through the strike. And actually, I was recruited on. There was a bit of discrimination after the strike because it was a given back in the day. If your dad worked at the pit, then you probably went into the pits as well. But for some reason, they were stopping striking miners' sons going into the pits just after the strike. And
so
one of the mining unions,
my question to you is, though, could you have joined a Conservative Party if Margaret Thatcher was still in charge of having closed down all the pits?
That's a good question, and I asked myself that many, many times, and I sort of change my answer every single day, because I think Margaret Thatcher at the time is probably what the country needs. And I think we get these prime ministers throughout history, and they are of their time. And probably Margaret Thatcher wouldn't work today, but I think back in the 70s, the country needed a bit of a shake-up. We're coming to we've got all these big nationalised industries which were probably holding the country to ransom at the drop of the hat. They could just go on strike and bring a government down.
The NUM did.
A balance.
The NUM did go on strike. So
They
You
did in
think she was right to close
1974.
the pits in retrospect?
I think, looking back, I was very upset at the time. Obviously, my community was. But, things move on, but we cannot be dependent on coal. The coal industry at the time was heavily subsidised by the taxpayer. My wages were heavily subsidised. The coal board, I don't think it ever turned a profit in the 40-odd years it was going. And obviously, when it went private, a lot of pits closed. And then, through privatisation, they really had to turn a profit. And the result being is they've all gone now. So, we could not compete with cheaper foreign coal. And we live in a free market. And we cannot keep subsidising people's wages forever.
Yeah. Look, let's talk about your own politics in particular. Yes, I think you'd certainly identify yourself as very much a working class Tory. You've just said that. You've been quite outspoken in your short period as an MP and running for an MP. During the 29 election campaign, for example, you expressed some pretty strong views about some bad behaved council estate tenants. I think you said you like them working in fields, picking potatoes, living in a tent, getting a cold shower at night and up again at 6 o'clock the next morning. You still got elected, though, with a healthy majority of more than 5,000. So my question is, do people, you think, share these views, these sort of quite strong views, a lot more than maybe some in the media might make out?
Yeah, I mean, let's be clear that the demographic of people I was talking about wasn't council estate tenants. It was criminals living on council estates who were given council houses on a regular basis. These are drug dealers. These are violent criminals. These are thieves. These are petty criminals. These are people who, for some reason, we keep housing on these estates and making people's lives a misery. And I'll tell you what, Tom, there are people living in Lincolnshire, living in Kent, living in substandard accommodation, caravans and tents and whatever, who do get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, who do go and pick vegetables, who do probably have a cold shower at night time. And guess what? They're paying their taxes, they're not causing trouble, and they're paying their way in life. And you know what? It's not such a bad thing, is it, that people have to go to work for a living and contribute towards society rather than be given free housing, free handouts to cause mayhem all over the council estates, all over Ashfield. I stick by my words.
So is the welfare state too generous?
I think it probably over the last 20 years, it's de-incentivised people a lot. I know the tax credit system, when that was brought in at the end of the 90s, was probably, at the time, a very kind and generous thing to do because it brought people out of poverty straight away. But a byproduct of that, if you like, an unintended consequence of the tax credit system is that people are de-incentivised. I've been a manager before and seen people working 16 hours who refuse to increase their hours to 24 or to full-time because they are no better off. So on one hand, it's been good. It's helped people get out of poverty. But on the other hand, it's stopped people progressing in their careers. And that's at a detriment to employers as well.
Do you want to see a little bit more tough justice, though, perhaps, on exactly the sort of people you're talking about, people who are criminal and yet still getting the largesse of the welfare state? What sort of things do you want to see happen to them?
Absolutely. I think, we live in a society where, especially places like Ashfield and Eastwood, where I represent, people want to see the criminals, these people who are making people's lives a misery in my area, they should pay more. They should pay back. They shouldn't be given free handouts. If they're going to commit these crimes, let's see the punishment fit the crime. And this new sentencing white paper that's just come out, I'm delighted with that. I want to see some of these people who are making my residents' life a misery thrown in jail. And quite frankly, for some of them, they can throw the keys away.
Okay, let's talk briefly about your episode of coronavirus. Obviously, you met the Prime Minister, I think it was on a Thursday, in Number 10. Of course, you had no knowledge of having coronavirus at the time.
No.
You then started losing a taste on Friday. You took a test,
Friday,
got the result back on Sunday. How did you feel when you realised you got that test back, you knew you'd been in close proximity to the Prime Minister? How did it feel when you realised that you were going to be responsible for putting him into isolation for 2 weeks?
Yeah, it was not a great feeling, to be honest. And when I had the test, I didn't think I'd got it. And my wife didn't think she'd got the virus as well, which just goes to show you, even with the most mildest of symptoms, which we had at the time, you need to get a test. And actually, the track and trace system on the Sunday was brilliant. I had to put all the details in of the people I've been in close contact with. And obviously, the ones I could remember, I messaged them as well, privately messaged them. And obviously, I spoke to the Prime Minister on Sunday. Obviously, he was asking about me and my wife, but he then told me that he got to isolate for 14 days, which is proof, actually, the track and trace system actually worked, and it worked really well on that occasion. So I've only got good things to say about the track and trace system from my own personal experience. But yeah, a little bit embarrassing that I put the Prime Minister out of action. But, you know, we live in a modern age where you can do things by Zoom, and I've been watching him all week, and he's cracking on with the job.
So you said you spoke to him on that Sunday. Did you say sorry to him?
No, I didn't say sorry. He basically rang me up to ask me how me and my wife was. It was just a nice phone call, a pleasant phone call to get from the Prime Minister.
Okay, and look, I must ask, why did you stand so close to him in that photograph? That was clearly less than a metre. It looked like you're having a jolly old time. Absolutely no social distancing going on whatsoever.
It's they're very strict in Downing Street. You know, it's COVID safe. I had a photo which probably took 2 seconds. We had a safe distance meeting, and the proof is in the pudding, really. Not one person in that meeting has developed COVID symptoms since that meeting. So I would say that we worked very, very safely indeed.
Okay. Lee, thank you for joining us this morning. You've been very open and frank, and I know Gloria's enjoyed listening to you as well.
And I will send my best to Sinead. Please,
Cheers,
send our best to Sinead.
All right,
Lee Anderson, new Conservative MP for Ashfield. Thank you for joining us.